The Dallas Cowboys got a win in Pittsburgh because of the secondary weapons on offense. We'll tell you how it happened on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are breaking down the All-22 film. We're going to talk about Dak Prescott's play, some of the no-name defenders that stepped up and played well on Sunday. But, Landon, let's first start with this. Robert Saleh, new Cowboys defensive coordinator. No,
my thoughts. That's pretty funny. Pretty crazy morning, to say the least, right?
It's ridiculous. All right, so let's actually talk about the Cowboys and not the Jets, who are a disaster. I want to talk about the secondary weapons because going into this game, we thought that in order for the Cowboys to win, it's going to have to be a really big CeeDee Lamb game and a really big Jake Ferguson game, and both of those players made some big-time plays in this one. But the reason why the Cowboys won the game was because of the secondary players. Who do you want to start talking about first?
I mean, I think we have to start with Tolbert, right? Just because of the way that, ultimately he became more than just a secondary weapon in that game, especially by the end of the game. It's just the way this always seemingly is playing out now, right, is that let's go back a season, right? Go back to this time last year when the Cowboys offense was struggling, right? And it felt like they couldn't quite get the passing game going, and we couldn't quite figure out why. And then ultimately what happened is that CeeDee Lamb kind of stormed into Mike McCarthy's office, demanded a bunch more touches. The Cowboys started giving him more touches, and then the offense started to really kind of congeal around that situation. I think that, we're kind of going into a similar situation like that this year a little bit, except I think they understand what the issue is. It's taken a while for CeeDee Lamb to become the threat, to kind of get into the rhythm of things with Dak and to become enough of a threat to start to open things up for these sort of secondary receivers. And I think that that's really where, this offense runs, right? Is that basically, the Cowboys have an unstoppable weapon, right? And they will continue to feed him until you stop him. And then once you stop him, you're going to open up opportunities for other guys like Turpin and like Tolbert. I think for Tolbert, for him to go out there while this defense is trying to wrangle CeeDee Lamb, and then to be able to go out and run just the variety of routes that you saw him run on Sunday to get open, whether it's the short stuff, the contested stuff, just like a stop route in front of Dak and a short pass, whether it's the whole shot, to beat cover two for 40 whatever plus yards that he got. It's once the Steelers decided, hey, we're gonna bracket CeeDee Lamb, we're just not gonna let CeeDee Lamb beat us anymore. You needed somebody to go in there reliably and win against the man coverage against the other corner and find a way to create space and to be able to do, the wide variety of routes that were required in order to find the open space that was unoccupied by the Steelers defense. Tolbert was that piece. Tolbert was that guy that they were able to kind of move around, get a whole bunch of targets. He converted them all, or a lot of them. Then obviously the touchdown, the game-winning touchdown is kind of the piece of the piece, the resistance at the end of the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Tolbert had the game-winning touchdown and a lot of big plays, but another weapon I wanted to mention, and you mentioned him briefly, KaVontae Turpin.
Yes,
from the moment this game started, it was clear that Turpin was going to have a big role. He was kind of their answer early on for their lack of a run game, because what they would do is these little flare passes, and it helped with some of the pressure stuff. And they didn't always result in big gains, but he did give them a couple early down successful plays. And I even want to mention the very first play of the game, the kickoff return, he has a really good kick return.
Yeah.
That gives the Cowboys good field position. The Cowboys get like 2 first downs, and then they're kicking a field goal, right? So Turpin played well, and then he also had the big play down the seam where he beat Beanie Bishop. He had another one where he drew a penalty on a holding call. Like
Right.
this was Turpin's probably best game that he's had, like complete game. It wasn't just one play. He made 6 or 7 different plays in this game that I thought were impactful.
Well, it's his usage. And I think that's the thing that's really was fun to watch and exciting to see is that they're not just trying to use him as just a gadget guy or as a reverse only guy. I think one of the things that they started to realize that they can do is attack teams horizontally with him, right?
Well, see, like I love Brandon Cooks, but that's not Brandon Cooks's game anymore, right? Like it is for Turpin. Like get the ball in his hands and he can turn a 2-yard play into a 9-yard play. And that can be the difference in some of these games.
That kind of orbit motion stuff, return motion stuff that he does, and then tossing the ball out to the flat with some space, getting him on crossing routes across the formation. And then once you started like working this defense horizontally, you start waiting on him to release to a sideline either way. Suddenly they hit you with the seam route, right? And now suddenly he's sprinting up the field, and all he needs is just a half a step of clearance, and he's faster than your DBs, and he gets to the back, and Dak can make that throw up the field. So I think what we've seen is that not only Turpin has developed a lot as a receiver, and he's become more reliable as a hands catcher and holding on to the football, but I think the Cowboys have figured out a way to use him that actually benefits the rest of the offense, because ultimately when you're attacking, horizontally to the flats and that sort of thing, it spreads that defense out, and that makes things a lot easier for, runs up the middle, passing in the middle of the field. So I do think that, kind of taking the traditional idea of, oh, this guy's a deep threat, and then flipping it on its head a little bit and allowing him to be a weapon that you can use to attack the flats as well, has really kind of helped open things up a lot in the middle of this of defenses for this offense.
And I'm telling you, there's going to be a play off these flare screens to Turpin where Dak pumps the screen and throws it down the vertically, probably to CD that's coming. So I'm just letting you know.
Yep, absolutely.
Let's talk about some of the other secondary players. I feel like we have to mention them. Hunter Lipke. We mentioned him briefly yesterday. Now he didn't have as big of a role in this game in terms of like his offensive output, but he did make one of the biggest plays in the game on that 19-yard reception.
Yeah, I mean, and I love the play design on that too. They won that snap with formation. They were on the left hash going into the end zone, and they had trips to the field side. So basically, the wide side of the field, they put trips on that side. All of the defensive focus is on that side. I think at the time of the snap, the Cowboys had 4 players on the left outside of the hash, and the Steelers had 4 players on the left outside of the hash as well. They go to the snap. Dak turns his back towards turns towards the trips, draws enough attention. You see Lipke flare out to kind of set up the screen. He turns back around, tosses it over, and there's just a clean runway. It's been great. It was great to see BB get out to get that kick out block. You saw, I think it was Bass at that point, get up the field for the lead block, and then Lipke just take the ball and accelerate incredibly and get all the way down to the 4-yard line. Just really great stuff. And again, probably doesn't work if that's your number 1 tight end or a player that is like, a featured player on this offense, right? Because teams are going to, point that out and see that. But because it's your fullback, because it's your down roster guy, he kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And he's reliable in that sense that if 1 or 2 big plays a game, if you get him the ball, he's going to make the play. And he made the play there, and it was a really big gain for the Cowboys.
And just a couple others I want to mention. Brevin Spann-Ford played a little bit more. Yep. He got one of the was it the first catch of the game?
I think it was the first catch of the game. Yeah, for sure.
First catch of the game. We saw him out there a lot blocking. It seems like the Cowboys are still interested in running a lot of 13 personnel. I'm curious to see what his role is going to look like moving forward. But one of the things I do worry about when you use this many players is that it's hard to trust them week over week. And that's why they're secondary players and not star players, right? Because they're consistency game over game. But this just so happened to be a game in which most of those guys played well. And that's why you're able to put up so many yards against this Pittsburgh defense.
Yeah. And again, I think that's that. I mean, like you said, part of the reason that you have that is that if someone's not performing well, you could swap them out, right? It's like, okay, this is not Brevin Spanford's day. Let's focus a little bit more on Schoonmaker or that sort of thing, right? So I think that's the benefit of having these kind of, and I think that's the thing is that outside of the Cowboys, stratosphere or however you want to call it, media sphere, right? There's lots of talk about how this team doesn't have like secondary weapons, and I think that's fantasy football talk, right? Because there isn't necessarily a rosterable second guy outside of Ferguson.
Look at you talking fantasy. This is great.
I'm talking against fantasy, Marcus. Let's be clear here. And I think that's it's kind of discounted the fact that the Cowboys actually do have guys that they reliably want to get the football, just not at the rates that make them rosterable for your stupid fantasy football team.
By the way, go check out the Locked On Dynasty Football podcast. We have 5 shows every single day talking about your fantasy team. Check that out on the Locked On podcast.
I'm sorry, Kate. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. All right. Let's talk about Dak Prescott. Let's have an honest conversation about how Dak Prescott played against the Steelers. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Maybe you want to bet on this Cowboys-Lions game on Sunday afternoon. Right now, the Lions are 3.5-point favorites in Dallas. I know the Cowboys haven't been good at home, but still, that's a lot of points. Or maybe you want to go check out the latest futures odds. Right now in the NFC East, the Eagles are still favored to win the NFC East over on FanDuel. Washington second, Dallas third. If you think the Cowboys are going to go on a little bit of a run here in October, maybe check out those lines. And again, with your first bet, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com. This episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours and hours. How can you spend your time more wisely so that you can improve yourself? Why don't you check out Hillsdale College, which is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to the Free Market Economics, the Great American Story, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the class that I'm taking right now, which is a literature class on Charles Dickens's Christmas Story, The Scrooge. It's fantastic. It's all you got to do is pop on your phone. You can listen to these lectures. Most of them are like 30 minutes to 60 minutes. They're so easy to listen to. They're so much fun. Most importantly, they are free. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's that easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are breaking down the Cowboys Week 5 win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Lena, let's have a conversation about Dak, because, of course, whenever you win a big primetime game on the road, the quarterback gets a lot of credit. How do you think Dak performed in this one?
I think he played mostly a good game, and I think he's going to get all the credit in the world, as he should, for leading the team back and that final drive. And those 2 of those last 3 drives were just masterful. It felt like he had gotten back into the swing of things. He drove the ball down the field, especially in that last drive. Did such a great job of managing the team and managing the clock as well, not just like making sure that they got down the field, but make sure they were winding the clock down. But we have to talk about the fact that this has become a common refrain with Dak, right? Where, and again, I love Dak, and he's our quarterback, but I think it's something we have to recognize, that there are games that happen where Dak is the cause of and the solution to the problem, right? Yeah. And it feels like, obviously, it's hard to even discuss kind of what success the Cowboys would have without Dak Prescott, because it's a difficult topic. But I think we've seen at times that when we've been surprised that that backup quarterbacks have had success when Dak is gone, it's because they don't take a ton of risks, and they are the games in which you can get by being a game manager. That's the games in which our backup quarterbacks had no problems kind of winning. It's when you need that extra level of hero ball that to win.
Which I think you're going to need this week. I think
which I think is something you need against good teams. Like, it's not something that like, oh, it just happens occasionally. Like, this is something you need in the NFL. I think there are times when Dak can press and he can be his own worst enemy in some of these situations. And I think this game is a great example of that, where, look, I mean, you can come out and try to say, hey, the blocking wasn't great. And certainly at times it wasn't. They were facing two of the best pass rushers. By the way, maybe the biggest thing that happened to this game was Nick Herbig getting injured, because he was on an absolute tear, for the first part of the game. So I think that
crush, by the way, Nick Herbig.
Yeah.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, you just can't deny those Wisconsin guys, right?
I know.
I think the issue that I guess what I'm coming at is that I would really love to see Dak to kind of further reduce some of this, risk taking, and I understand that, like, that's part of his game and that's part of what makes him great. But it's like, you got to know you've got a rookie left tackle facing, TJ Watt or Nick Herbig, right? And then you've got Steele, who's, been good but not incredible, and is facing, again, either Nick Herbig or TJ Watt. You got to know that when you're inside the 20, you got to get rid of the football quickly, right? Or get out of the pocket or do something, because you can't just stand in the pocket and think that you have all day, or you're going to give up 3 points like the Cowboys did. There's just no excuse for how many trips the Cowboys took into the red zone and came away with so many few points, right? Like I understand that Dak's involved in that first part of getting them into the red zone, but it's his job to put the points on the board as well. So I think it's fair for us to examine the negative part that presented the scenario to put Dak into the situation where he becomes the hero as well. He put himself a lot in that situation. And I think that, it would be great to start seeing more games where you didn't even need to get into that situation, where it didn't require a 2-minute, drive at the end of the game to win, if Dak had just made like one or two less mistakes at key moments.
So let's go through the turnovers really quickly. I want to rank them from worst to least egregious. Okay. I think the worst of the 3 turnovers that he had was the fumble on third down.
Yes.
Inside the 20-yard line. Like, it's third and long anyways. It was pretty clear after 2.5 seconds that you weren't going to score a touchdown there or get the first down. You were drifting back into the pocket, so you didn't help your tackles at all, right? Like, drifting back in the pocket against TJ Watt and Nick Herbig is a no-no, right? It's okay in that situation to just fall down, take a sack, right? It's not the end of the world. Kick a field goal. It's a successful drive. You can't fumble the ball. You can't. Like, you have to know the situation there. Falling down and taking a sack and living to fight another day is so much better than giving Pittsburgh the momentum, taking points off the board. That was the worst one for me. The first down play that he threw to Jalen Tolbert, they were moving the ball. It's first down in 10. Yes, Brock Hoffman got a bad penalty. You were moving the ball up and down the field all game long. To basically just throw away a drive into double coverage on the next one was egregious. And then the third one was obviously the CeeDee Lamb miscommunication. I don't know what happened there. My guess is it was Dak's fault, not CeeDee's fault. But those kind, at least you can live with, because he was trying to make a play. It wasn't. I can live with that one, right? But you can't have all 3 of those. You can't.
I think I would flip the second and third one, because except for the exact same reason that you just mentioned. Because to me, I put that interception that he threw on the post into double coverage. Don't call that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
well, Jalen Tolbert said in the post game that was the play they worked on in practice all week, and they knew they were saving it for a moment. But Dak, if you see the 2 defenders there, you just don't throw it.
But okay, I see. I think if at the point when he threw the ball, you needed Tolbert to win a little bit more on that route. I feel
don't disagree.
that's maybe so I don't disagree that he maybe probably shouldn't have thrown it, but I also feel like, okay, first of all, why are we calling that play right here at that spot where we were? Why then, right? And then I think that the execution was but to me that interception in the end zone, like, I understand the miscommunication aspect of it, but having gone back and looked at the play, like, I don't even know what Dak thought CD was going to be doing. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think based on where the ball went, he thought that that he was going to be breaking like on a comeback route or something, or like an breaking
Like a
outside
back shoulder
route.
fade, maybe.
Maybe, but there's nothing in CD's body language during that route that made me think that was going to happen. And on top of that, like, you know, we just talked about the fact that Dak is a see it, throw it quarterback in a lot of ways. Like, I don't understand. I mean, that was a lot of anticipation he was throwing with if he was trying to throw like a comeback route. And on top of that, I didn't see any kind of motion towards the pylon. So
I do want to say, like, one of the reasons that it's so beneficial to have a franchise quarterback is because even in games where they're making mistakes, which was this one, right? Dak made 3 big mistakes. You're able to put together enough drives to win you a game to overcome it, right? And this is one of the things we loved about Tony Romo is there would be games where Romo would have a couple early interceptions, but he could play flawless for a quarter and a half and you would win a game that maybe you shouldn't win. That was Dak in the fourth quarter of this game. It's just, you would like to see him not have so many of these games where he's got to bail himself out late.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for the Cowboys offense, it just feels like they are 1, 2, and sometimes 3 plays away from scoring 35 points. We just haven't seen it yet this year.
It's like that Romo Buffalo game, right? It's like we look back at that as just an incredible game by Romo, but I mean, it wasn't. It was probably ended up being a very average game because he played incredibly in the second half and he played absolutely atrociously in the first half. So,
yeah,
you know, I think that's where it is that it's tough to calibrate sometimes Dak because he is sometimes the issue, but he's also more than that, more often than that. He's the solution. So I think that's ultimately where I'm at, is that he is the solution. That's the answer. But I think we have to, like, you know, address the fact that he is also sometimes the cause of these problems.
And the last thing I want to say about Dak is sometimes you'll get into these games and after a quarter and a half, you'll just know what kind of game it is, right? Yeah. It was pretty clear that this was going to be a low scoring game and the field goals were going to be a good thing. There were other times earlier in the season against Baltimore and the Saints where you can't settle for field goals. Like, you just know those are going to kill you. In this one, in bad weather against an offense that wasn't doing anything, like, it's okay to kick a field goal and live for another day. I wish Dak would sometimes realize that quicker into these games rather than later. That's all.
I agree.
All right, let's talk about some no-name defenders that stepped up on Sunday night. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. I absolutely love Gametime. In hindsight, I'm kind of wishing that I didn't use, or that I would have used Gametime to go to this Cowboys-Steelers game, but it ended up working out. I don't know if I would want to sit through a 2-hour rain delay, but Gametime is the only ticketing app that I use when I want to go to football games or comedy events near me. Gametime now has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats so that you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. One of my favorite things about Gametime is that you'll get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what your seats are going to look like. Plus, they have the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out the new Locked On NFL show with 2 shows every single day. One in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, later. Let's talk about some no-name defenders that played well on Sunday. Who do you got?
There was a lot of them, man. That's the thing about this game is that it felt like there was a lot of guys who we needed to step up, and it felt like there were a lot of guys who did step up. I think we have to start with the defensive ends, right? I mean, this was clearly the concern going into this game. You obviously don't have Micah Parsons, you don't have DeMarcus Lawrence, you don't have Sam Williams, and then you lose Marshawn Nealon. Was it 5 snaps into the game?
4 snaps. 4 snaps.
Yeah. So you're down to your 5th and 6th defensive ends, and really you're down to your 5th defensive end and your 4th defensive tackle is what you've come down to. And so it definitely was going to be an uphill battle, and the Cowboys needed to kind of have a lot of schematic stuff kind of ready to make up for what the pass rush loss was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more than that, they needed these young players to play at a level that could get them to opportunities so that they could avail themselves of these pass rush blitzes and that sort of thing. So I think that the way that you saw guys like Wheat and Golson, and
I thought Golson had the best game of his career.
I mean, absolutely, right? I think both of those guys did. I mean, Wheat's obviously very young, so that's not saying a lot, but Golson, who's played quite a bit of football at different points, it was definitely his best game. Was able to maintain the edge, was able to actually create pressure, which was not something we've seen him do a lot as a defensive end pass rushing.
And I'm a little dubious that it's going to be like a week over week thing that he's going to be able to do consistency. But I do think in the meantime, Golson has given them something as a run defender on the outside where I think
that's the key.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's the tank replacement for the next couple months.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense, right? Like, I think what you want is you've got Lawson, you've got some of these other guys who are a little bit like Wheat, who is a little bit kind of more the undersized backside defensive end, right? And you play Golson at the kind of point of attack defensive end, the strong side defensive end. And that makes sense. I mean, he kind of played that role very well. And I think you saw some positive things in the run game from guys like Wheat and Lawson as well. So I think the key thing here is that you got to make sure that you find a way to, stick into the right gap and play the run early correctly. And then if you can just get them into passing situations, you can rely on Zimmer a little bit more to kind of produce a pass rush with the way that he's sending the blitzers. So, and I think that seemed to work. We'll see if that works as well against Detroit. I think that this is a game plan that fit well against what you were having to face offensively with Pittsburgh. I don't know necessarily how effective this is going to be week to week, but I think this week
it worked.
What those guys did, it really did work. Yeah.
Yeah. Couple other ones. I thought Carlos Watkins, did he play great? No, but he gave you competent defensive tackle play behind Mozzie Smith and Linval Joseph. And that's all you could ask for. It's like somebody who was not horrible. And the Cowboys were getting horrible defensive tackle play in the first 3 weeks of the season. I'm not saying it's great yet, but this was at least a step in the right direction.
Well, Joseph played incredible.
This is the best game.
He's not necessarily a secondary player, but Joseph played his best game maybe in 3 or 4 years. So, I think that it was great to get some surprising performances from people that we weren't necessarily expecting to step up in the way that they did.
One other player that I want to mention, Maris Liafu. I want to check his name. So he came into this game questionable with a quad injury. Made a couple big plays in this one. Mm-hmm. He's just completely overtaken Damone Clark. Damone Clark did not play a defensive snap on Sunday. It seemed like Damone Clark had a really good training camp, but Liafu has already completely beaten him out for that spot.
Yeah, and that is a little bit surprising because Clark did have a really good camp. So, but yeah, I think Liafu has definitely performed well those last few weeks, and I think has earned that spot. It's unfortunate for Clark, but look, Clark has been given plenty of opportunity, and was someone that everyone was excited for. But see Liafu out there, you can tell that right now he's just the better player.
Yeah. Anybody else you want to mention from this defense?
I think we just have to throw out, Amani. I think he, again, just being asked to kind of go out there and start and be the opposite corner, and for him to go out there. Look, I understand what this was and who we were facing, and this wasn't exactly a vaunted passing attack. I get that, But still, Amani is a guy that was on the street 2 weeks ago. And now you picked him up off the street and he's starting at corner opposite Trayvon Diggs. And there's a decent chance that he might do it again this week if Carson can't come back. So I just think that it's worth pointing out that, they haven't necessarily gone after the guy yet. And I don't know that, we may be sitting here a week from now pretty upset with Amani.
It's gonna be a tough matchup, whether it's Carson or Amani next week. Like that's a rough one.
But I think for right now, you have to be happy and satisfied with the way that he's played while he's been out there.
I mean, if you think about it, they traded for Andrew Booth. They swapped him for Nahshon Wright. And Andrew Booth started last week and then didn't play a single defensive snap this week. Like just completely out of the picture. He gave you, again, competent cornerback play. Probably not something that you can rely on week to week, but you don't need to because Carson's coming back. Bland should be back after the bye week. Like he did his job, and now it's time to move on.
That's right. And that's all you can hope for with some of these guys, these down roster guys, is step up when they ask you to and do your job. And hopefully we can get a win. And then next week we'll figure it out all again.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. Go check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All the same places that you would download the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.